Are you buying that there are big changes coming in Big D? We welcome in NFL analyst Darren Woodson to answer that question. Obviously, you have some inside information. Do you think there's some changes coming?
As a believer, as a guy that's been around that organization for so long, I don't see change coming. I'm just being honest with you. I do see, if you talk about change and wholesale change, in which Jerry was very emotional in that conversation, if you're talking about change, you're talking about two positions, the head coach position and Jason Garrett and Tony Romo. And those two changes will not happen. Jerry Jones is basically on record already saying
record.
Jason Garrett's going to be his guy, and Tony Romo is going to get an extension on his contract. So that's wholesale changes. That's changes across the board. I do see maybe a culture change within this organization. Maybe the attitude will change a little bit.
Why?
Maybe not an open door policy that the players have had to going towards Jerry. That may change, but for the most part, because
why is that going to change?
Well, I think that's the only part that can change right now, simply because they're backed against the salary cap. There's not a whole lot of change they can make, first of all. They can't just cut a guy because of the risk of the salary cap hits. But they can make some culture change. They can put in place that Jerry's always had an open door policy for players to walk in, have a conversation with them, and he glad hands everyone. I think that's going to have to change around that. And I think what it really started was with the argument with Jay Ratliff that he had in public. I think that's where he probably saw the players were emboldened and that he was at risk because he was always available to these players. I think that's going to have to change.
So you're saying Jerry would reduce his autonomy in the locker room, his authority or his open door policy?
I think the process of Jerry giving it to Jason Garrett, somewhat like he gave it to Bill Parcells to say, hey, listen, it stops, the buck stops here. Doesn't come to me, it stops with Jason Garrett, the same way he gave it to Bill Parcells.
What do you think, Stephen A?
I think this conversation is utterly ridiculous because Jerry Jones is utterly ridiculous. Darren is right on the money when he talks about, what change are we talking about here? If you ain't talking about getting rid of the head coach, you're not talking about getting rid of the quarterback, what are you talking about here? You're not talking about anything. So what? Your door's going to be closed. It's not going to be open. Wow, we don't get to talk to you as much. Excuse me, are you still cutting the check? Yes, that's the reality of the situation. Remember, what flew under the radar was the Jay Ratliff had gotten into it with Jerry Jones. And he's going to have to pay a price for that because I don't know how professional he was in talking to the boss, who also happens to be the owner who cuts his check. And that's something to be revisited at another time. But at the same time, still in all, what it comes down to is the roster you have is the roster you have. The players you have are the players you have. In order for a culture change to be infused, you've got to change leadership. And he's not willing to do that. We got a stud in Tony Romo, who is a stud in terms of what he can do as a quarterback, even though his 1-6 record in win-or-go-home games is very unimpressive. But that has a lot to do with the coaching, because what you do is repeatedly you have these coaches out there that put Tony Romo in a position to go out there and figure out a way to get it done for us. You look at the adjustments Bill Belichick makes. You look at the kind of adjustments that Mike Tomlin makes. You look at some of the great coaches in the NFL and some of the adjustments that they make according to their personnel. You don't necessarily see that with the Dallas Cowboys. You certainly don't see it with Jason Garrett, yet he still has his job. So much so to the point that even while coaches are just falling by the wayside before his very eyes, 7 coaches fired on Monday, what do they sit here and say? We sit here and hear Jason Garrett talking about how he doesn't want Norv Turner as his offensive coordinator, as if he has a choice. This is what goes on in Big D. This is why in the last 16 years, they have had 4 double-digit winning seasons. That means 12 of the last 16 years, they can't even win more than 9 games. That is just pathetic for an organization that is known as America's team. It's embarrassing, and I'm sick and tired of talking about the Cowboys. They stink like I told you they were going to stink. They're home watching the playoffs like I told you they'd be home watching the playoffs, and that's exactly the way it's going to stay until their owner finally recognizes that he needs to move out the way and get real football people in there to make football decisions.
That's never going to happen. That's never.
That's why y'all ain't going to win, and that's why you ain't going to win.
To basically step away from this, that's totally not going to happen. Now, I do see some positives in the fact that Jerry has openly come out, because Jerry is the optimist. I mean, he is always optimistic about the landscape of this football team. this is the first time I've ever heard Jerry step out and say, hey, listen, things are going to change. Okay. And I'm not saying, again, things are going to change from a personnel standpoint, but I just think right now the culture of that organization is going to change.
Okay, let me give a quick disqualifier here. Stephen A. Smith grew up a Giants fan, so he just hates the Cowboys, so it's completely not objective. So now for some objectivity here, back to you. You played for this team. The only thing that caught my ear, well, he is objective. He's been objective on this show every time we've asked him.
Really?
Now, I'm with you, Stephen A., in one case and one case only. I am sick and tired of talking about Jerry Jones talking, because that's all I hear is talking. He is capable of doing. Back to you. And the point is, the one thing that caught my ear yesterday was he did mention the Herschel Walker trade, which made possible the drafting of one Darren Woodson sitting right here, because it brought a horde of draft picks, right? Jimmy called it the great train robbery, Jimmy Johnson did. Right. And those picks, Jimmy swung and missed on some, but he got an Emmitt Smith, he got a Darren Woodson, I could go on and on. So is there anybody who could bring that haul of draft picks? Well, you could trade Tony Romo. You could put him out on the market right now, and he would bring a draft haul. I'm pretty sure he would. Somebody would jump at the chance, because we all know he's a talented player, probably nearing the end of his prime, but still in his prime. Would he do this? He's on record as doing nothing but pledging allegiance to Tony Romo. Have you heard anything differently?
Nothing.
Okay.
And I don't see that.
I don't either.
I can't see that happen.
Okay. And nothing that Jerry said yesterday indicated he was going to close his open door policy. There was no self-criticism in any of these remarks that I heard, right? He was saying everyone else at Valley Ranch is about to be very uncomfortable. Well, is Rob Ryan a strength or a weakness? That's the only coordinator I could see that you fire, because Jason Garrett is your offensive coordinator. Basically, he's not going to fire Jason. Is he going to fire Rob Ryan? I don't think so, because I think he's still a strength of the team. Okay, so where do you go? I've already advocated, Stephen A. agrees, they should go get Norv Turner. I'm not sure Norv would subject himself to this lunacy that's going on out there, because he's been there and done that, and he and Jerry didn't always see eye to eye on things. There was a little friction, a little bad blood when Norv departed to coach the Redskins. So, again, I would love to see Norv coach Tony Romo the way he coached Troy, because he turned around Troy's career. I like Norv as a play caller better than I like Jason Garrett. Would Jerry inflict this upon Jason? Would he force this on Jason? I don't know. Is that...
I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, okay.
I think even against Jason's will, I can see that being a possibility because of where Norv has been, and everyone else feels the same way. Norv is a great offensive coordinator.
Sure. Period. End of story. Okay. Who else is tradable? Is DeMarcus Ware still tradable? I guess so.
Yes, he's tradable.
But he's been hurt and nicked and a little bit defective here for the last 2 or 3 years. Would he bring what Tony Romo would bring on the open? No, he would not. But you could if you wanted to, but I'm not sure that gets you anywhere.
They are. Listen, let's stop it right there. They are not going to trade Tony Romo, DeMarcus Ware, or anyone else.
Des Bryant, I guess.
No one can bring them the value that Herschel Walker trade brought to them. So there is no way they're going to trade anybody. It starts with the culture within that organization.
I agree.
And I'm not saying that Jerry's going to have his hands off altogether, but I think he's going to empower Jason Garrett to make some tougher decisions.
Will that make a difference?
I think that makes a difference, because we all heard Jimmy Johnson say it a few weeks ago. Talked about it's a club over there. It's a social club, and it is. You visit Valley Ranch, and it is. It's wide open. You can walk in, talk to the guys. That has to change. When this team has been great, is when Jimmy Johnson had a closed door policy. It went through Jimmy. When Bill Parcells came in, it wasn't great, but it was a team. He turned the whole culture around because the buck stopped with the head coach.
And remind everyone, were you afraid of Jimmy Johnson?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, my job was on the line. Was I afraid of Bill Parcells? Yes, my job was on the line. That's where it's going to start with Jason Garrett.